Welcome everybody to Reel to Reel. Today we're doing The Fifth Wave, one of these apocalyptic movies, and we have with us here Dean Kevin and soon to be Dean Jeremy. I'm Dean Val. So this movie has everything here. It has depopulation, MK Ultra, man-made disasters, FEMA camps, microchips, Americans fighting Americans, people against people, which is kind of the fifth wave here idea. So it has all the ingredients here for us to have a good discussion about what's happening here today with our world here, with our planet. And I usually like to get into the synopsis here too, just to give everybody, if they didn't see the movie, they have an idea what happened. It's based on a book, and I think there's a second series of this movie too, a sequel to it. Let's see here. In the opening scene, Cassie Sullivan, played by Chloë Grace Moretz, is walking through the woods with a gun in her hands. She comes across an empty store and takes what little supplies she can get her hands on. A voice is heard calling for help. Cassie finds a man hidden in the back. They both have their guns aimed at each other. The man lowers his gun, but Cassie won't lower hers because the man is holding something in his hand. She orders him to show what's in his hand, but when he does, a light flashes from it and startles Cassie, prompting her to shoot the man. She sees that he was holding a crucifix and she is horrified at what she's done. Several months earlier, Cassie was a regular 16-year-old or 15-year-old teenager in high school. She lived with her parents, Oliver, played by Ron Livingston, and Lisa, played by Maggie Siff, and her little brother, Sam, played by Zachary Arthur, in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. Her best friend was Lisbeth, and she had a crush on football player named Ben Parrish, played by Nick Robinson. Soon, however, everything changed as a mysterious alien spaceship descended and remained hovering above everyone for a number of days without movement. The humans would come to refer to these visitors as the others. And it's interesting now that they talk about the new normal, and she mentions this too, how the last normal day of my life, she recalls here in the movie, and we're never going back to what was typically referred to as normal, which in a way wasn't normal, was just a cover up. I mean, there's so many things going on that we didn't see, but now in a way, everything's being exposed more and more so. So what was normal, in a way, was never really normal. It's just that it was hidden from our awareness. Okay, so the others unleashed the first wave, which is an electromagnetic pulse which wipes out all the power on Earth. Planes fall from the sky and kill countless people without a fresh water supply. Cassie and Sam have to gather water from a nearby lake. The second wave brings powerful earthquakes and devastating tsunamis to coastal cities, killing even more people. I think the book mentioned so many millions were killed by the first wave and billion or so the second wave. It had numbers attached to each wave, how many people were killed. The third wave has the others modifying the avian flu, which infects people like Lisbeth and even Lisa. Cassie, Sam, and Oliver bury Lisa in the front yard of their house and say goodbye to her. The three head to a survivors camp which is like a FEMA camp, of course. After a few days of residing in the camp, a large cloud of dust forms, and from it emerges military men in vans, led by Colonel Bosch, played by Liev Schreiber. He says he's there to help them. They gather all the children and send them on a bus to a safe location. Oliver reluctantly lets Cassie and Sam go. Sam forgets the teddy bear, so Cassie turns off the bus, runs off the bus to grab it. The buses start driving away before Cassie can make it back. Bosch tells the adults that the fourth wave has begun. The others have begun to use humans as physical hosts, inciting anger and panic among the adults that demand to know how they can tell who is really another. A gunfight breaks out and nearly every adult is killed, including Oliver. Cassie mourns her father and proceeds to move forward on her own. The kids arrived at Camp Haven, a military training facility. Ben and Sam are among those that are recruited. They are given new nicknames as well. Ben is Zombie and Sam is Nugget. Ben meets Sergeant Resnick. She injects a tracker in the back of his neck and sits him down in front of a two-way mirror where a boy is hooked up to a chair. Resnick says the boy is really another. She shows Ben through a lens that has a green skull, then gives Ben a button to kill the boy. Resnick sees that Ben is wearing his dead sister's necklace, using it as a motivation to push Ben to press the button, which he does. Cassie carries a gun that her father gave her before he died. She arrives at the abandoned convenience store in the opening scene and is forced to shoot and kill the one wounded man as seen before. Next, Cassie walks through an abandoned freeway littered with many abandoned cars and sees many dead bodies. A shot is fired, hitting Cassie in the leg. More gunfire is heard and Cassie crawls to safety under one of the cars before she passes out from blood loss. Meanwhile, Ben and the other kids start their training. He befriends another kid named Dumbo, and they are presented with a girl called Ringer, who is tough and takes crap from no one. She is an excellent shot, and she teaches the kids how to shoot after Ben takes her down during training. Cassie wakes up to find herself in the care of a young man named Evan Walker. He tends to her gunshot wound. Cassie wants to leave and find Sam, but Evan warns her that it would be dangerous for her to go out there on her own without protection. Cassie discovers that Evan took her gun and hid it. She runs away, but sets off one of his traps in the woods. Evan runs back to her and protects her as someone else with a gun is walking through the woods. At Camp Haven, Colonel Boach brings Ben into the control center and tells him that the fifth wave is already happening. He gives him a helmet that will allow him to detect an other so that he can easily kill them. Evan teaches Cassie how to defend herself by showing her how to take someone's gun and incapacitate them. She shows him pictures of the people she used to know and love before the invasion. Quickly, Cassie and Evan develop an attraction for each other. The kids are brought to a location where others have been detected. They spot a number of people with green skulls and fire at them. However, they then see Ringer through their lens and see a green skull. Before anyone can shoot her, Ben stops them. He is spotted with the green skull too. He quickly realizes that Bosch and Resnick lied to them and that they are really others. The fifth wave is the kids themselves, since they are easily manipulated. They're being used as pawns to slowly wipe out the rest of the humans. Cassie learns that Evan is not quite human after witnessing him kill someone in the woods. He claims that when the alien ship arrived, a switch went off in him. He says he saved her when she got shot from someone else in the distance. Evan claims that his love for Cassie is making him more human. She runs from him and is rescued by the military. Cassie is taken to Camp Haven and goes through the same process as the other kids. Only this time she can immediately spot something suspicious with Resnick. The two of them fight until Cassie knocks Resnick out. Ben confronts Bosch about the truth, to which he confirms that he and the rest of the military personnel are others, and that they need the Earth for themselves. The base is then infiltrated. Cassie runs into Ben and is then reunited with Sam. Even shows up and kisses Cassie one last time before he goes to blow up the facility. The heroes run outside as the place is blown up. Ringer rescues them in a van and they drive away while Cassie watches as the place is destroyed. Sad for Evan's sacrifice. But Colonel Boch and the rest of the infected military and child cadets escape in a fleet of helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft. The kids then set up their own camp with some of the other kids like Dumbo joining them. Cassie closes the film by narrating that they haven't lost hope and that hope is keeping them alive. So there's a huge amount of subliminals in this film, and there's a lot going on here. I noticed a lot of people who reviewed this film, very few people really get into what's really going on with this as a documentary and what they're showing us, the leads they're showing us. So let's give it over to Kevin here, and he can, Kevin usually have something that for us to work off of. So go ahead, Kevin.
The movie would begin then with the main character seemingly surviving in an apocalyptic style situation. Evidently, some great upheaval or event had befallen the Earth, and the movie was very much based on this planet and the approximate era we currently are in. How would such an individual find herself in such a scenario? Regardless of how she might think she is the victim of circumstances beyond her control, that things are just happening to her, this couldn't be further from the reality of how things actually are. For each individual, each being is awareness, a real awareness that resides in real universes of the all is now, a reality that, as the reference suggests, is an absolute everything. But for the real awareness that we each are, to recognize this isness reality, our real awareness is in fact a part of. The method by which this is made possible is by creating a reflection of the true reality, a simulated reality that the entirety of, and all that makes it up, is what the is isn't, and so we have our comparison. And when we reach a point where we want to be more than just a simulated experience, then we begin to recognize the purpose the simulator and all the experiences we have in it serve. That of the comparison by which we can recognize the is, and supersede then the necessity for the simulator, and our real purpose of is standing as real beings of light that we are now is made so, although the is an endless absoluteness, that the recognition of it is equally as endless. But at least we have extricated ourselves from being resigned to restricting creation. For everything in creation must be restricting, for we always are shackled to our agreements, the experiences we forge, and although creating is a necessity for our comparisons, we are rather then mired in the effects of the consciousness we have created. For yes, the consciousness is the vehicle, the mechanics, that provides us our simulation, a little like a computer game, where we add data files to the game, all the specifics and details, which then become the game we play, and we then have our awareness placed in the body vehicle, which decodes the files we have added into our simulation through the body senses, like putting on a virtual reality headset. If we can imagine the headset with the loaded game being the consciousness we have constructed. And so, the design of creation is such that we decide our simulation, we decide on the idea files we wish to add to the consciousness, and so our simulation becomes so. A simulation, then, that is exactly as we have decided it to be, and anything that transpires within our game is by our design. That people generally are not aware of the mechanics of creation has them rather reckless in their consciousness creating, as where they focus, where they place their attention, their every thought and emotion, all the activation through the faculties of the body vehicles, are these very files or ideas that, when decided on, mould the consciousness, and thus our simulation that stems from it. As an example, an individual who wallows in self-pity is deciding to experience along these lines. The consciousness will be shaped, and the individual's simulation will reflect this general state of decided being, the thoughts and emotion ideas which fashion this particular variety of simulation, and they will find themselves in miserable simulated circumstances, and wondering how they got there, and even more so if they transition, but hang on to this self-decided consideration of self-pity, which then projects for them further miserable experiences into future lifetimes, and it would indeed seem as though they had walked into a harsh lifetime, and it couldn't possibly be based on their decisions to do so. And yet it was. It's just they are unconscious of these previous lifetime projections of ideas, and as readily as we can create our own ideas, we can decide on ideas that others have created, and so their ideas become our simulation also. The consciousness is an overall idea, and so, just as with any idea, if we agree with it, we incorporate it, and this is the way others can feature in our experience also. We agree with the ideas that they are, or the ideas that they create, and the latter will have us taking on whatever the idea intentionality behind the idea was. As such, we can take on more than we bargained for, as we can never determine the full package of a consciousness we are taking on and allowing into our experience, for the personal self alone can only see the surface, the way the idea appears from the one-dimensional arena. Over lifetimes then, agreements will intermingle, attachments will be forged, all an interweaving of a consciousness that allows shared simulated experiences, and all based on the overall ideas that what now is a collective consciousness comprises of. In order to find yourself on a planet, sharing it with a species, yes, you will have a consciousness that is such that the entire race will not be featuring directly in your experience, but there will be generally shared agreements that result in a generally shared species simulation. So, in fact, at any time, any individual on this planet could enter your experience, as there will be agreements that every human has in common, that the overall human experience and planet Earth happenings are commonly experienced. And yet there are specifics. Yes, there might be vast numbers of people being, say, force vaccinated as an example, but is this something that's happening to you at this moment? If not, then evidently there are differences in the agreements of your consciousness to theirs, or your experience would be identical. And so overall we can see that for the main character in this movie, her agreements were aligned with that of all of the humans of the planet, at least the broad themes, and so an apocalyptic situation will befall her as readily as anyone else, with variation as to what takes place for each during such a situation, in accordance with each individual's unique consciousness construction. So, for something unfavourable to befall an entire species, the species must have agreed and decided programmed their collective consciousness computer game that this be so. Again, a little reckless then, as to their consciousness programming, but as is generally the case, ideas that looked good on the surface were other than what they appeared to be. They carried other, hidden idea baggage, and this is the game of those that control the simulator overall. They have presented certain ideas. These ideas have been agreed with. They have been marketed as beneficial, but in fact represented the intentionality of control and suppression, or to invade another species. The controllers would utilize windows of their target species agreements that allowed the controllers, featuring in the target species shared simulation. But whatever means was employed, now we have a simulator where the agreement through the overall consciousness is to the dark forces and their control, and in the case of the planet Earth then, this translates as the controller's ability to mold the human experience to a design that suits their controlling inclinations. And as their overall objective is control, what tends to happen when their controlled species starts to become aware of the prison guards and begins to strain on their chains is that more control is required. Agreement is such that allows the imposition of control, but agreement must also be maintained. Much of the agreement is subconsciously ingrained from lifetimes under the whip of the dark forces in all their forms, but ideally they would seek to secure conscious agreement also, and so they market their controlling restrictions as essential for human survival. Tighter security and restricting measures due to the situations they had in fact created, like the 9/11 tower destruction, for example, blamed on terrorists, which then would require tighter restrictions to keep us safe from this fabricated threat. If the dark forces can't have the control they seek, they will continue to try to escalate the means by which they can lock down the human species to the extent of robotization and the complete managing of every thought and emotion through the personal self-vehicles. But there are many methods they can employ, generally along the lines of something they have created that impacts humanity adversely, with the free rein they have to do that through the agreements in the consciousness. Then the solutions are offered to offset this threat, which will be more control for the human species, who had been successfully marketed into acquiescence to such, as the perception of it being a necessity for survival. The movie would present us with the cause of this apocalyptic type situation, an alien menace that had manifested into human experience, and the world would be hit with 5 waves of devastating events: floods, EMF strikes which rendered all technology obsolete, an enhanced avian flu, and then the deployment of alien drones to kill all the human survivors. It was interesting how the movie presented us with a version of the flu that was world prevalent, and the wearing of the masks also a necessity, and the very masks used would be eerily like the standard masks most wear currently to combat the COVID-19 virus. Again, rather a case of predictive programming, for where we focus and place our attention on, we will be adding the ideas of to the consciousness, as this vehicle of simulation creating takes in its programming ideas indiscriminately, and the television, the movies, the ideas and themes provided program the consciousness as readily as if we had activated and decided on our own simulator creating ideas. The television, then, is really designed as a tool to steer humanity overall into a simulation shared that the controllers desire, through the implanting of the ideas into the consciousness. And so the general themes we see in the movies today, if widespread, far-reaching, and consistent, are very likely then the overall simulated experience humanity will share in the years to come. And indeed, this movie came out in 2016, and a mere 3 years later, we have our worldwide pandemic, and with the masks as very much a feature of it. And in reality, the standard masks are those used in surgical procedures, designed to stop the operating surgeon from having anything drop from his mouth onto the patient. They are designed to stop then larger particles, such as spittle and the like. But as has been revealed, you can spray aerosol cans right through the masks, and as you can see the spray, this indicates the particles are of a size large enough that they are visible, and yet the masks can't prevent the spray from passing through them, and any viruses or germs will be far smaller, invisible to the naked eye, and so the masks present as no protection in fact whatsoever. It's interesting that flooding was one of the waves of attack. Again, a predictive programming mechanism, for the controllers want that this be a possibility they are able to create. For it does seem we have had many resets through human history, as the human slaves evidently become too aware, and such methods of complete depopulation are necessary. and flooding does seem to be one of the controller's preferred methods, with much by way of evidence suggesting as recent as the 1800s of so-called time there may well have been a reset, with evidence of global mud floods that tend to be a feature of extreme flooding. In regards to the viruses and the required responses, these would include the lethal vaccinations, part of the depopulation agenda also, and the vaccinations containing the additional nanotech that is priming the human body vehicle for robotization. So a predictive programmed theme that allowed then the controllers to pull off their pandemic for the purposes of their vaccine ultimately, as depopulation is very much on, as once again humans are becoming too aware, and the controllers fear a loss of their cattle, which through their agreements represent the controllers' support structure. That the children were separated was an interesting subliminal and theme also, for it does seem a standard that when these resets are set to occur, as is generally the case, the adults are wiped out and the children are removed to safety, then returned to the planet, and represent the first generation of slaves in the new era of control after the reset, and the children then are heavily indoctrinated with whatever ideas the controllers wish to impart upon them, and as the generations go by, what transpired before the reset is beyond living memory and a fabricated history put in its place, and we see in the movie how a reason was provided for the separation of the children that was false, but allowed then the children to be militarized, to be routined, indoctrinated, and marketed into hunting down the adults, and as it transpired, the invading aliens were actually the ones orchestrating this militarization of the children, that they had infiltrated humanity and were destroying the human species. In actuality, this is rather the case anyway. The controllers are generally reptilian. Their control structure extends through all the systems of the earth, and then goes from the scene to the shadows, then off a planet. So we might say aliens already have infiltrated, and just like in this movie, they masquerade in human form, where in reality they are something altogether different. Just like in the movie They Live, where the actor Roddy Piper, who played the main character, could see the aliens through the special sunglasses. On this planet Earth, the controllers, the governments, all are shape-shifting reptilians, but naturally only reveal their human form in the public. So when it comes to countries fighting each other, the governments at odds with one another, as it's the same reptilian dark force controllers that are through all the systems of the earth, it is in fact one hand of the controllers played off against the other, all for the masses to take on the conviction and agreement that further control measures are necessary to prevent further wars ever from transpiring, and this could quite readily extend beyond the planet, as the dark forces hierarchy of control incorporates many species, many aliens. So were there, say, an alien invasion that required then additional controlling measures for humanity to ensure their safety, again, this could be one hand of the controllers, the earth-bound reptilians in the systems of the earth, squaring off against another hand, which could be an alien invading a contingent of controllers, all coordinated and arranged, and the possibility of a faked or orchestrated alien invasion is well documented and referred to as a Project Bluebeam, and indeed we saw how in the movie the necessity was for the implantation of a device in the neck that was supposed to render the aliens recognizable through their human outward forms, and this has always been part of the agenda also, to market not only vaccines containing the nanotech, but microchips also, and it could well be so that a situation the controllers create then has the microchip as the offered solution. And in the movie we saw another common method employed, that of divide and conquer, of cultivating mistrust between humans, that there is little chance of any unity established, that could be problematic to the controllers through the sheer numbers alone. Have everyone suspicious of each other, that we might be aliens, or that we might have a COVID, whatever's necessary to maintain segregation, along with the continuous propagation of engineered hatred between ethnicities, sexualities, whatever divide lines are available to be exploited. The agents deployed to rile up the various sides, the created scenarios, generally using brainwashed, mind-controlled participants to carry out attacks on each other, of white people killing black people, and so forth, to keep the mistrust and hatred between colour, creed, sexuality, religion, etc. going.
It's really like a game plan that they give you. They're not really sugarcoating it, but it looks fantasy, if you're not really if you're looking at it as an entertainment, not really like a documentary, it just seems kind of, well, that, would never happen. But especially with the mask scene and the government set up sort of FEMA camp in the stadiums and things like that. So it's very real. Things like that are in the makings. I mean, they're making these supermax prisons in the UK. That's online as well. So it's a lot of things going on.
Yeah, I just saw something from Alex Jones last night about that. The FEMA camps in Utah and places in France, I think it was, where they isolate people with COVID and families can't see them, and they test them every week or 10 days, and if it's still are positive, they have to stay in another 10 days or month, and it's really these things are like experiments to see how people react. These little isolated places where they do have these camps and forced or mandated situations where they do need to take the vaccine in order to obtain resources. You see how people are reacting. And there's resistance. Certainly, we're seeing resistance. You don't see it in the media, but it's happening. So we'll see where it goes. I thought the what was this, Bush, the military leader, just these little words like these ideas, we're taking you to a secure location. Human nature has it that where you hear something like that, and the rest of it, you don't even need to prove it to yourself, or you can to rationalize what you've already agreed to. But okay, you hear that secure location. First thing, human nature, you kind of feel like relieved, or and that's what the controllers use, these ideas that they put into people. Or Fauci, like we have another strain. Okay, so a variant. I mean, all these just one idea put into people's heads, and then they do the rest. Basically they're already, the human nature agrees to it or not, depending on which side you're on, you could say. And then you just rationalize your side by false science or some kind of science. But it's just so easy for the controllers to put something in people's heads, just by a word, especially if there's emotion behind it. So I saw this in a number of places in the movie here. And then the children, I deal with the orphan trains and the Tartarians and the orphan trains where they got rid of the adults and then they used the children to propagate this new history. That's an example if you're into the Tartarian culture and history. But here we see it in the movie too. They're indoctrinating the new generation. And their generation, they'll grow up to be, if they agree with this cycle, their kids will be prompted to also get rid of any stragglers, through this means, this where they use to screen and see the aliens, supposedly aliens in their visors there. So children always, Nazi Germany goes back to that and how they use kids to report on their parents. So children are very important. And even we want to use them as seers so they can do something better for the planet, because they're so pure and innocent and sincere. They can do something of a benefit. That they're like virgin ground, so that's why they're so valuable to anybody. And the bad guys are using them all the time. Look at our public school system. It's just full of indoctrination and ideas that don't make sense, that training the generations for their own use. Ryan, you have anything you'd like to discuss?
A discussion with my friend about these days and about the virus and the government, what did happen in this world. I told my friends about it, and I suddenly think about this movie. This movie is very, as told Kevin about this, it's very similar about these days. What happened in phase 1, phase 2, phase 4. If we are in a phase, I think in a 2, the ticks and the virus came and killed many people. Maybe the phase 4 is coming soon for all of us. We need to prepare for this phase.
Yes. And how do we prepare, Ryan?
As you doing said about to aware and observer and do something real. Because these all of these phase about the mind and about the one of the five bodies. If the observe what happened and do not allow this creature attack one of our five body, we can survive.
Yeah, and it's always been here. It's just it's intensified now, but it's always been here. It's just awareness of the consciousness and awareness of people are seeing it now. So it's nothing like it's not brand new. It's been here all the time. All this control and preparation for more and more restrictions and control. But it's been here. It's just a matter of we're seeing it now. It's more apparent to more
Yes,
people. So
yes, and tell everyone about this creature and all the people awake and awareness.
and I say I watched these people review the movie, and none of them, except one person out of maybe 10, talked about the controllers, and the rest are just talking about, the first part of the movie was okay. The second part just went really, there was nothing to it. It was boring. Made no sense. They looked at it as entertainment. They're just reviewing the movie in that respect, how good the movie was. But in terms of what it was showing people, in a way, the actors were they didn't have any big star actors in it, really. So in a way, it was the content of the movie. Why did the controllers put this movie out? Just so maybe people would have, they're really showing the events that they're creating. And it wasn't about making anything popular with having popular actors in there, but they're really showing what they're doing in this movie. And it really didn't have much of a high rating here with most people. It's like 20% or something, Rotten Tomatoes. But in terms of, I thought it scored like 98% on my rating chart because of what it's showing, all the things that they're doing.
Especially getting into the microchip. I thought that was interesting. That was a prevalent part of the movie. I mean, that was how they didn't appear with the green skull and all of that, but how it got implanted into them, and then they kind of cut it out. But in a way, I kind of saw that as misleading as well, because with the use of 5G and the graphene and all these other things, they don't even need to put a microchip of that size. I mean, it's all just like 5G can just do scans of houses and it'll get a 3D map and model of it. That's the type of technology it is. So it's misleading in a sense, but it's like a hint also.
Yeah, that's why they can put out these movies. They're putting out what they've done like years ago in a way, but they're so more advanced now with their technology. This is like years ago. I mean, yeah, it's old stuff.
Yeah,
But
maybe it's very old and not very popular in this way for this creature. They show us what happened to do with in the past, and these days we control with a nano robot with some telecommunication, and the mind is preparing for what happened next, because they don't want them people resistant about the waves and against about what happened. They want to control the mind and put some nanorobot in their body, and when they people know about it, like use a mask. In these days, uh, one of the masks we watch in the YouTube, they have a very small nanorobot in it, and when you briefing this nanorobot in and they active it, and they can receive send and receive the information for government.
Wow. Yeah, I like what you said, Kevin, too, with these, you spray through the mask. Aerosols can go right through there. That's something that maybe give to people to consider when they tell you to put your mask on. But it just, so much of it doesn't make sense, but people, again, they're just going along with things, and that's what gets them into trouble. But at least, you know, people are waking up more and more, and it's being exposed, and people have a chance. And that's why we're here, to give people an opportunity and chance to do something better for themselves. It's a big step for people, a huge step, but it can be done. And this is a great opportunity for people, even though it's could be a, you know, dire opportunity too, if they choose, you know, to follow along with things. But in this other sense, they can really benefit for themselves. They decide to wake up. This thing too about turning, you know, the kids and the people, the divisions that they create, and turning kids, you know, to do what they're doing, and just the whole thing about people not trusting each other. That's a huge thing now, especially with the COVID. They're using that as the main thing here. Used to be terrorists. You're a terrorist. You know, there's a suspect of being a terrorist, or you're a suspect of being a KGB spy, you know, during the Cold War, or a communist. There's always something, you know, there's always somebody out there different, and they use that differentness to push their agenda. Yeah.
I wanted to add a little common sense aspect of like how kind of subservient and docile people can be, and of course it is a movie in its own sense, but a documentary also too. You see a lot of people following along. When in the moment when the military showed up to the camp, it struck me as odd, as I had never seen, telling all the parents, okay, go in that building, just go like off to the side and gather in this building. I instantly was kind of like, well, that doesn't make sense. If they just kept them outside, they could talk to them while all the kids wait on the bus. They didn't need to kind of corral them and herd them like cows or sheeps inside their little pen. And then of course it turned into a little massacre. There was no parents left. So I thought that was interesting. I was like, it's kind of duh.
And then the guy who resisted, I mean, that's what they like. I mean, that prompted them to kill everybody, you know, because then everybody, he riles everybody else up, and then they have an excuse to get rid of people, you know. And then they can report back, you know, they can use that as like, see what happens when you resist, you know. I mean, these people, we're just trying to make them safe, you know. You don't want to do that. So we have to think, you know, we have to be clever and creative with the ways that we handle what's going on here. Use your creativity, because could get really gnarly for people in certain areas of the world. And work together with others who are in agreement with you, you know, support each other, so that you have witness. Then more people will see, well, if you have agreement with what you're doing, well, maybe you're making sense, or, you know, you are right, or whatever, you know. So each of us has friends and a group of people. We can do that, to do something to, like we're doing this movie review, you know, to help people wake up. There's so many things you can actually do that make sense, that help people and help the world wake up. So get out there and do it.
Yeah, I wanted to mention a real side experience I had actually last night. It was really emphasizing the importance that we do something, that you just create something, because you don't know who it could bring along. Like specifically, it highlighted Kelsey and all that she created, that it made others come, and then they spin off and do their own thing. They create things, so it kind of just multiplies with all these people that come along. because the dark forces, they're pretty creative. They do a lot of things, but we could do a lot of things also. And also, wanted to mention something quick. You mentioned Alex Jones. I came across him. He's tied to an Israeli intelligence company based out of Dallas, Texas. Actually, his chief of editor or whatever, this lady, she was an ex-agent of the CIA and that intelligence agency. So it's kind of like he's an in-betweeny sort of thing going on.
Well, I see these people like ace in the holes for them. You know, they groom these people to expose what they're doing, but then in the end, maybe, you know, when it's time to go into a FEMA camp or something, Alex Jones may say, well, you know, time to go, or they can do something funny. Dane Whittington of geoengineering.watch, when presented with primary water, I mean, he's the big researcher. He researches chemtrails and COVID and all very well. He's a great research team. Then when it came to primary water, he said he looked on a couple of websites and he said, well, there's no scientific evidence for it there, which is really strange, you know, because there's all kinds of information still on it, at least through 3 websites and scattered information here or there. So yeah, these people up to a certain point, and then Kevin having experience with David Icke and going like this when Kevin, you know, talked about, presented him with more information that you know, something more than what he knew. So they only go a certain way, but they're you know, they're doing something, and it's what it is, you know, it is what it is. You kind of have to extract your own benefit from each one of these people and see how it relates to something real and to something that makes sense. I recommend people see this movie. It's good. Even though it's maybe not as entertaining as some movies, but it's well done in terms of showing all the different agendas that they have here. Thank you, everybody, for being here again for Reel to Reel movie review, and we covered The Fifth Wave today. Next week, join us for
Was the Devil's Advocate.
Yeah, that's a great one too. So, and we usually sing the New You after to connect with the reality that just is. So it goes like this: New You, you. Jeremy?
New you.
Ryan?
You.
And Kevin? Thanks for joining us. See you next week.